Hey everybody, today we are doing another topic video, and this week we're doing one that I think is kind of fun, where we do some fantasy casting. Take a movie that already exists and try and see what it would be like if you were to cast someone else in that role. Very interesting because it can completely change the tone of the movie, depending on the actor who interprets it. It's fun especially to look up like classic movies and iconic roles and find out what kind of actors were considered for the role, who turned it down and such. Sometimes I think the films would have been more interesting had they gone a different route, and other times I can't imagine anyone else but the person who played it. But before we start with the first one, I'm going to plug my website. As always, it is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist and I do commission portraits and I sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. But okay, I would have loved to have seen what Kirk Douglas would have done with the Randall McMurphy role in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I wish there was a recording of his performance when he did the Broadway play version in the 60s. Yeah. So I actually am one of those people who thinks that there are other people who could have played that, I think, better than Jack Nicholson. Not to say that I don't like Jack Nicholson. I think it's a perfect role for him, and he's wonderful in the film. Born to play it, really. Randall McMurphy is just kind of a touchy character. He's a character that I don't think could exist in the modern day in terms of mainstream Hollywood. I just think people would struggle with him because he is old-fashioned in a certain sense, but he is very Jack Nicholson. You know, I always think that somebody like McMurphy should be somebody that, you know, if I was in the room with them, I should be afraid of them. And Jack Nicholson certainly fits that description for me. I love his energy and his humor and always kind of skirting the edge between that glee and also major danger as well. And it's somebody that you don't necessarily trust, but you want to root for him. All that stuff is really good. But when I think about Kirk Douglas, I think of somebody who's just naturally a little bit more hard, rougher, and maybe a little bit more menacing, just naturally as a presence. And I think just overall in his films as well. And so I think that if he were to play the role in the film, there would be more of a sense of that brutality, that danger, that sense of seeing Randall and how he could fly off the handle in a certain way. And I do think there's something a little bit too performance conscious about Jack Nicholson's performance at times. So yes, I think that would be a really unique sort of thing to see. Kyle MacLachlan as the main character in Lost Highway. No hate on Bill Pullman, he did his thing, but it feels like it was written for him. That kind of handsome white bread exterior, but with a weird darkness underneath that makes him the perfect muse for Lynch. It's almost like an extension from Jeffrey's dark side from Blue Velvet. Watching his performance in Twin Peaks Returns, or The Return, only emphasizes how perfect he would have been in that role. Yeah, I can see that, absolutely. You know, I like Bill Pullman. I think he's one of those people who unfortunately fell into, you know, a certain typecasting. I think it's because he has a blankness about him and an invisibility in terms of his acting technique. It makes him kind of perfect for playing certain characters that are, you know, doormats, shall we say. I always think about like Sleepless in Seattle and he playing just like the disposable fiance. He is only there to be basically a doormat that is going to get steamrolled over. And then Meg Ryan is like, you know, I don't think we're right for each other. And he's just kind of like, okay, that's fine. I mean, you know, all that's ridiculous. But I like that he gets to be in a film here where a lot of that blankness can be used, I think, to a certain advantage. And I think Lynch does that. He can take people that seem very unassuming and bring out a lot within that. And I think he does that, like you say, with Kyle MacLachlan in Blue Velvet. Because, yeah, you know, when you first see him, he's just a boyish kind of, you know, handsome guy. And little by little, you start to see another side of a person, depending on their circumstance and the intimacy of that circumstance. And so, yeah, I just naturally think that Kyle MacLachlan fits Lynch so well. And I mean, everybody thinks that. It's because he gets the humor. He can play those parts in Blue Velvet, again, where he is unassuming, but he also totally is able to be in, you know, like Twin Peaks and absolutely have that positivity and that freshness and that eccentric sense of humor. Lynch and MacLachlan are a match made in heaven, just the perfect creative team, I think. Lost Highway, I do feel, lacks something, and I think a lot of that has to do with just the whole piece and how it is presented, but maybe Maybe it would add a little bit something more if Kyle MacLachlan had been cast. I really don't know. I'd need to go back and watch the movie and really think about that one. Marilyn Monroe as Holly Golightly in Breakfast at Tiffany's instead of Audrey Hepburn. She was the original first choice to play the character, and I've always wondered what could have been. I still love Audrey in that role, though. I mean, I actually disagree with that just because Marilyn Monroe, obviously she was, the initial choice. Truman Capote wanted her. He wrote Holly Golightly in a way sort of for her. But that's a completely different movie. The real Breakfast at Tiffany's in terms of the novella is very different than the film version. And that's fine. It's just, for the film version, I think you have to cast accordingly. If you're going to go a different direction, you should go a different direction in casting. And I think that Audrey Hepburn actually fits the role just fine. I'm not a fan of the film Breakfast at Tiffany's. I never really was. I saw it way before I ever read the novella and didn't particularly care for it. Then I read the novella and I realized, wow, look what this could have been. So in that sense, like, if it could have been more the Truman Capote style and it was much more a darker, multifaceted kind of story, yes, Marilyn would be wonderful, I think, because like I said, she can bring out a sort of melancholy through her vulnerability, through that childlike sort of innocence, yet she also has that charm about her, that way that she holds her body, that, you're drawn to her in a certain way. You want to protect her, but you're also intrigued by her. You may also even desire her. It's all, I think, very complicated. And, when I look at Marilyn Monroe in movies like Some Like It Hot, I think that's a good example of where she gets to use her humor, but she's also a very fleshed out sort of character, plays to her strengths quite brilliantly. And I could see her kind of using a similar performance style there in a version of Breakfast at Tiffany's. But like I said, I think that the version that exists, Audrey's fine for it. Though I also heard that Shirley MacLaine might have played Holly Golightly, and I actually think that would be genius. Absolutely genius. Like I said, always interesting thinking about these things. Michael Shannon as Jack Torrance in The Shining. Someone knows about my love affair with Michael Shannon. I admitted once a long time ago that I had a major crush on Michael Shannon, and to this day, people will not let me live it down. But yeah, I think he's an interesting actor. I think he is somebody who has a lot of range. He's also a very funny and eccentric human being. And I think that comes out quite strongly in his performances, which is why I think, yes, he would be really good for Jack Torrance. It sounds almost like I am just shitting on Jack Nicholson in this whole video, but I'm not. I like Jack Nicholson a lot in The Shining. I think it's fantastic for him. Perfect person who has that kind of charisma and talent, but also is really going over to a near farce with this performance. All of that is intentional, and Jack really gets the humor in it. Jack Nicholson really understands the humor of it. And yet I've always felt like there are actors more capable of bringing that kind of borderline farce performance into more of a dangerous territory. There is something about Jack's, while dangerous, while scary at times, I still feel a little bit removed from it because of the cartoonishness of it. And I think somebody like Michael Shannon could really bring a danger to it that's more palpable and more immediate, while also maintaining that humor and that kabuki sort of thing that Jack Nicholson is going for. I think the humor of The Shining is most important. And, I think Michael Shannon has that kind of humor. And he also has an interesting way of enunciating that is similar to Jack Nicholson. I mean, not that they're similar in terms of the way they speak, but I just mean there's a similarity in the way they seem to not really care about how they are perceived on the outside. So interesting idea there. Mickey Rourke as Butch, the Bruce Willis role in Pulp Fiction. Rourke was actually Tarantino's original choice and even wrote it with Mickey in mind, but Rourke, in a bad place at the time, didn't even read the script. I thought Willis was good in the role, but Rourke could have brought something entirely different and more memorable to it, in my opinion. He was also a boxer in real life. It would have been a great comeback long before The Wrestler, and it was before all the plastic surgery. Oh, what could have been. Yeah. I love the Butch character in Pulp Fiction. And the more that I watch Pulp Fiction, the more I find myself drawn to the Gold Watch storyline. Honestly, I think it might be the most compelling for me, at least at this time in my life. And I like Bruce Willis in the role, but I do think, Bruce Willis is one of those guys where he's more of a movie star. I think he's more charismatic and charming and cinematic on screen, but not necessarily the most compelling actor. And, like, even when I look at a movie like Die Hard, He's very likable and somebody you can get behind, and he has a great energy about him. And yet I can totally see somebody else playing that part better. And I think Rourke is a kind of person who understands, I think, real acting, not just being a movie star or being cinematic on screen. He's somebody who can really open up characters and make them more faceted. I don't know, but I think I can see it being very interesting from the point of view of Mickey Rourke. Somebody who also is very dangerous and rough around the edges in terms of just maybe his persona and his performance quality. In the 80s in particular, and early 90s, I mean, that was peak Rourke in terms of just really proving himself as a really interesting character actor. And somebody who could be very dynamic and versatile. And yeah, unfortunately, I am aware that at the time he was really struggling or starting to kind of downward spiral in a certain way that I don't think it would have been good for him to be in the film. Just because if you are in a Tarantino film, he's very much somebody who expects you to show up, be ready, on time, and as passionate as he is about the work. So yeah, it wouldn't have worked from that point of view, but I do think it could have added perhaps more pathos to just the whole sequence, and certainly more pathos for Butch. Steve McQueen or Paul Newman in the Matt Damon role in Rounders. I love McQueen in The Cincinnati Kid, but felt Rounders was the technically better film. John Malkovich was great in the role as the Mad Russian, but Eddie G. Robinson or Peter Lorre maybe as the Mad German would have been kick-ass. Oh gosh. Rounders is hilarious, but really, I don't find much about it to admire other than just how hilarious John Malkovich is in it. I mean, he's just so terrible, but just endlessly entertaining, worst Russian accent of all time. But he at least made it fun and interesting and a little bit different. But I think in order for that to work, you need to have somebody who is a straight man right at the center. And based on these two choices here, I'd go more Paul Newman, just because I think he's more naturalistic than somebody like Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen I consider more like a Bruce Willis. He's very charismatic and very cinematic as a presence and, just in terms of his look. But who's the person here who has the real versatility, the natural ability to act and really open up the characters a little bit more? It's somebody like Paul Newman. He can play that straight leading man to a bunch of colorful characters in the same way somebody like Matt Damon could. And just Rounders as an idea, it does feel like something that I could see Paul Newman doing in maybe like the late 60s, early 70s. But I do like the idea, and I think you get it. Like you gotta cast colorful characters around somebody like a Matt Damon. And here you're going with Edward G. Robinson. Peter Lorre, I think, would be really fun because that guy really knows how to choose scenery, shall we say, in certain instances. So I'd go more for him because I think he could really bring the theatricality and the comedy and really kind of push things into uncomfortable territory as he often did. So yeah, those are a few of the answers. And again, I really enjoy talking about these what if scenarios. So maybe we'll do another one. But thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to give a shout out to my patrons as always. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you're interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch my videos here and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.